Get ready to be jolted out of the ordinary and into a world where conversations are charged with intensity and facts. The Lightning Strike Talk Radio with your host, Mohammed Fahim, broadcasting live from the heart of the city on Chicago's Progressive Talk Radio, WCPT 820 AM. Welcome to a radio show that charges through the airwaves with an electricity like no other. Here's your host, Mohammed Fahim.
Good morning again, this is Mohammed Fahim. I am with the Lightning Strike on WCPT, Chicago's Progressive Talk radio station. We come to you every Sunday, 9 to 10 in the morning. With me in the studios today, Ken DeLuke.
Howdy, folks.
Alderman John Arena.
Good morning.
And legislative attorney, Maria Muzaffar. And we will be talking to Maria about something exciting that happened with her last week and where we can go from here. But again, today, folks, we are going to be talking about something important that's coming up tomorrow, and that is the Martin Luther King Day holiday. That's going to be celebrated nationwide and in our nation's capital. In the where is that thing going to be happening? In which little arena over there, John?
I don't know, whatever one is in D.C. I can't remember the brand on that particular arena.
Okay,
but there's going to be some things. So they're moving inside because it's Arctic weather, cold. So, and he doesn't like small crowds. It reminds him of something. So I don't know what.
So the inauguration of the 47th, 49th, which president is he now?
47. Now, I'm really hoping that Biden, before the end of the day, resigns to make Kamala Harris the 47th president, and then he would be the 48th and have to scrap all of his swag and his hats and everything.
It's a small thing, but,
okay.
It's what we have. We're going to have to take the little things now.
For all you know, he may be still plugged into his suppliers in China, who can turn it around on a dime and send him the President 48 swag overnight. But here's the thing that we are going to be looking at, folks. This is something that we have bargained for, and we made a deal with the devil, and that has come to fruition. Okay, so we got to watch out what is going to be happening in the next few years. But if we are active and we are holding these people and holding their feet to the fire, nothing bad is going to happen. This country has been too good for too long to be afraid of something like this. And Tom Homan came in on the Christmas holidays in Chicago.
He did. He joined us here in Chicago. It was nice to have him.
And
he very nice
threatened to have the mayor of Chicago arrested.
Yeah. But it turns out his plans got leaked. Did you hear about that? So this morning on my drive here from Chicago, I heard that, maybe we're not going to have 100, 200 agents raid Chicago because now that you know about it, it's not a secret government action.
Oh, shoot.
So that might also be a little harbinger of things to come that, what you don't know will hurt you.
So you're saying that all of those undocumented workers didn't go to Washington in the arena to watch the inauguration?
So they're saying they're calling that off, but we'll take a rain check here in Chicago. We were geared up. Everybody, there was the non-for-profits, all the community groups were ready. They'd been doing training all week once that news broke. So, this is Chicago. We're ready for you, Tom Homan. But why don't you stay in Washington and
one of the other things that the incoming president has also threatened, folks, is to withhold any kind of federal funds for the fires in L.A.
Yeah, it's really interesting because what they want in return is grazing rights.
Yeah.
Which, has everything to do with whether there's water in the fire hydrants and how we manage pipes. So it turns out it's about money, folks. They want to be able to monetize land in California the way they want to, and we want to conserve it for nature and for the things that keep fires and keep, animals alive in our world, which turns out there's a bit of interconnectivity there.
And I keep hearing that people from a well-known agency which has the name Black and name Rock in it are going around offering to buy properties in California now
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think they preempted some of that, or with the governor put out an order kind of banning that practice, and I think they're going to work on some legislation quickly to try to protect some of that property for them.
Well, I hope that happens. And one of the things that obviously our great insurance companies, they all pulled out, a lot of them pulled out before the fire, saying that we're not going to be insuring anything in California.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of legal work.
There's going to be lots of legal things happening. So welcome, Maria. Welcome back from your trip to the White House.
Oh, thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
So in the studios with us today, folks, Maria Mozaffar is here. So Maria recently had a very interesting conversation, a very interesting trip to the White House. President Joe Biden recently met with Hanan Shaheen, the mother of Wadi al-Fayumi, the 6-year-old Palestinian-American boy who was tragically killed in an alleged hate crime in Plainfield in 2023 in October. So the meeting took place at the White House on Tuesday, January 14th, during the final days of Biden's presidency. And Shaheen was accompanied by our own Maria Mozaffar. Maria had authored a congressional resolution acknowledging Wadi as a victim of a hate crime. So, Maria, thank you so much for your advocacy. So the meeting basically was about 3 hours with the advisors to the president and a 10-minute basic one-on-one with the president. Can you describe what was that like?
So first of all, let me say, if you've seen The West Wing, it's exactly like The West Wing, the show.
I think it should be.
Yeah, it's exactly like The West Wing. But I think, the 3 hours that we spent, 1 hour was discussing prep for the meeting with the senior advisors. And then there's about an hour with all of the senior advisors. And we dug in very deep on the policies that needed to be discussed and why we were there.
Okay.
And then Hanan Shaheen had a moment with President Biden, a private moment in the Oval Office discussing loss and humanity, as you can imagine. And then President Biden joined us in the room with the advisors, and we were able to have a conversation as well. What was it like? Personally, it was a moment where everything that you can imagine you want to say when you've been seeing the last 15 months, that was on play. I had rehearsed, as you can imagine, extensively to have the conversation, and I was to deliver quite a few messages. And look, at the end of the day, every policy and every decision that's coming out of the White House and the administration is run by humans.
Yes.
They're run by humans. So when people hide behind institutions and block out the organic, natural human discussion, that fundamentally create policy. That's a huge mistake. And I think at this time it was a moment where they're ending their administration. And it's very important to send a message and clearly reaffirm with moral clarity the review of what has happened.
Right.
That's very critical. But also, this is beyond any president. When you deliver a message that can be shared with the nation, it's beyond President Biden. It moves on to the next president. How do we want to see the world? How do we want to talk about political rhetoric and its danger that actually directly resulted in Wadea's death, and how you connect those dots with what kind of things we will support as tactics of war.
So one of the things that I have heard people criticizing this visit, and I want to get that out also, is why was a chance given to this president who is being responsible for so much genocide and everything, havoc of supporting and murdering thousands of Palestinian children. What was the need to go and meet somebody like that? Was that reaffirming his actions, or you wanted to bring the human side to him face to face and hold him accountable?
So this is not a chance for Biden. The meeting was not about President Biden. The meeting was about reaffirming what has happened in the last 15 months in the biggest way at the highest levels of power. It's very easy to have discussions about boycotting and not meeting, which I also declined a request when I didn't think it was significantly going to impact anybody. But when you actually get the opportunity to speak truth to power and discuss a nuanced policy, then every American has a responsibility to take it on. And every person should be able to speak to their president. So this is not about giving Biden a chance for anything. He's in control of his PR. He's in control of his situations and what the White House wants to release. But he is a human being. And let me be very clear. With faith communities, and they believe this, there's no hierarchy of human beings.
Yes.
We are equal. He's given a task to be a president. Hanan has been given a task to be a mother of a child who was a victim to political rhetoric. And I have a task to be an advocate. And there was a moment when all three of us were in the same room. So we will take that opportunity to have a conversation.
That's an amazing story. Quick question. What is the one thing, if any, that surprised you the most visiting the White House?
I think the most was that there is such a disconnect. And I'll say this about the advisors. There is such a disconnect about the overwhelming amount of work that advisors are doing to try to bring humanity into these policies and what is being released as the final statement from the White House. The press, the people that control the press and how they want to create the positioning of the White House is a complete different department. And that completely gets lost. And so I think for this meeting, it was reaffirming to the advisors, look, whatever you're trying to implement on the ground is not getting through, because in the halls of Congress, we're not seeing humanizing of huge populations. So if you are trying to fight hate crimes on the ground, but in the halls of Congress, you're not giving that community any visibility, of course those hate crimes are going to continue because you've created hierarchies within communities, which is not even the intent of any community. So I think that is very, very critical. And also the overwhelming grandeur of the White House, the grandeur of it. There were a few places that were beautiful and wonderful to look at, but it really is a humble working space where people are at work.
Yeah.
People are at work. They're going from meeting to meeting, and it's an office.
Do you think, this was a meeting with Biden, and, he has an opportunity after his term ends to speak more broadly. And we've seen this from other presidents, and some have taken the opportunity and some have done less so. Did you get a sense in your time working on this and face-to-face that he might be a voice, and will he be effective if he is outside of the constraints of what the PR is from the White House?
So I want to say this, the timing of this actually, despite the critique, the timing was actually impeccable for the goals that we have to be able to protect dissent and to be able to protect free speech on these situations, is that we just had Jimmy Carter's funeral.
Yep.
President Biden gave the eulogy for Jimmy Carter. Even those pieces and the process of those are not going to be connected till President Biden leaves office.
Yeah.
Now, what has been shared in the press is that I took gifts for him, and those gifts were very deliberate. One gift was the Quran in English translation to create a human-to-human connection between faiths, and that's who we are as a country. There are multiple faiths, and to counter the false narratives of individuals that are being wrongly described in the media and through congressional hearings. There is a whole generation of youth right now at top college students that have worked very hard to get into Ivy League schools, that are speaking their truth, that are speaking what they believe to be true and advocating as their constitutional rights, and they're being misrepresented. And so to give him a kafaya to honor Hisham al-Wartani, who's a college student at Brown, who is now paralyzed because he was shot for wearing a kafaya. It takes that symbol to humanize that symbol in such a powerful way. Those thoughts will go with President Biden after he leaves office. And at the end of the day, he is a human being. His work is not done. Our work is not done.
Of course.
So I believe that you did have a discussion on Islamophobia, the anti-Palestinian sentiment, anti-Semitic hate in the context of what's going on in the Middle East. How did the advisors react to that, and how did the president react to that? Anything that he said specifically that you would like to share with us?
Well, let me say with the advisors, I I created a direct link in writing, by the way. This is why there's a letter written too, because it's public record now. But I said it in person as well, that the dehumanization stemming from political rhetoric from the highest levels of office resulted in Wadea's death. And indeed, that dehumanization also connects to why it's tolerable to see children being crumbled under buildings. And if this was Chicago and LA or New York, we would never allow this to happen. And it's become tolerable because we've dehumanized these children. And so connecting those results in not just anti-Islamic hate, anti-Arab, anti-Palestinian, but anti-Semitic. Anytime you dehumanize anybody, we have gone beyond social norms that's acceptable in this nation. Their response, obviously, they recognize that. They understand the connection of those dots. As far as what the president said, the president reaffirmed he carries a rosary. He considers the faith very important for the decisions he makes. He's guided. He also recognizes Islam and the contributions of Muslims. And this was a nod to the reality that there is a disconnect between what the truth is and what the messages in the media perpetuates for political expediency. But they go hand in hand, let's be clear. Congressional language and what we see on congressional hearings is to create a sentiment in the public domain. So we have to call it out at both levels. We have to call it out both levels.
You know, that's one of the things that most people don't understand, and especially the talking heads that you see on radio and television. They have an agenda that they are working on. They're not necessarily speaking the truth to anything, right? And then we let the media drive our reaction to what is happening. And then you get a lot of these people coming up and protesting, for example, in the streets. All of that is being driven by, I would say, misinformation, for lack of a better word.
Fake news?
Well, can hit
Which protesters are you speaking about? Because there's different types of protests.
I'm talking in general. Whenever there is something and there is a protest going on, okay, most of the people who are coming out to protest have really not dived into the intricacies of the situation. Most of them don't even know what they are protesting about.
Yeah, I mean, they drank the Kool-Aid, basically. They hear it, they're in their little bubble, and it's all that their universe represents. I was talking to a good friend of mine the other day, and we were talking about the economy, and he was saying how terrible it is right now, and on literally every metric, the economy is the best it's ever been for years and years and years, but because the news sources that he listens to, tries to paint this narrative of what reality is, they're buying that and not looking at the real world.
I want to bring it back to what happened in Plainfield with the murder of Wadi. Okay. Joseph Huber, the guy who actually stabbed this young kid 26 times, his wife had come out with a statement that the guy had been listening to right-wing media for 2 weeks constantly before this. And that really warped his mind to where he started imagining things and came out and attacked Wadi and his mother Shaheen, right?
And it's really a strange point on that is Mahim and him actually got along very well up until that point. So they were friends.
Absolutely. He actually played the role of a grandfather to Wadea. And I will say that I will reaffirm from everything that I see that I have no doubt that he actually loved him. But that is the power of political rhetoric. It
that's
can change.
Exactly where I was
change
going.
If once you dehumanize somebody. And this is why, we wanted to bring full fruition. This murder was so heinous. It wasn't one stab. It was 26 stabs to somebody who was defenseless. We wanted to bring to full fruition the purpose of his murder at the highest levels, which was also important for the visit.
She was stabbed as well.
She was stabbed as well. She was stabbed 12 times. And to be able to speak to that and hold herself with such resolve is incredible. But I will also say I don't want this moment to be an opportunity to politicize. Of course, the statement says that he was listening to conservative radio. However, the political rhetoric was coming from the highest levels of office in Congress with both Republicans and Democrats. And Democrats. So I think we have to be very careful to be able to see this opportunity and tell the truth of what it is. When it becomes clear that we have a political objective, any party and any political alliance can misuse political rhetoric and dehumanize.
And that is something that I really want you guys to be focused on, folks. When you listen to news media, or when you listen to, there's a lot of social media podcasts that are out there now. Anybody with access to a laptop and a light source,
right.
Okay, a ring light, is now coming out with their own podcast. And most of them are not talking sense. One of the things that I wanted to also share with you guys today is the Plainfield Park District Commissioners Board meeting. I had made a representation to them to name a playground in honor of Wadi Al-Fayumi at one of the local parks in Plainfield. And I had a message from the president of the Park District yesterday that we should we can definitely announce that the Plainfield Park District is going to be naming a playground in honor of Wadi in their next meeting in February. So that program is going forward. So they want to honor the little child's memory in Plainfield in a big way.
First of all, this shows you, and you remember the vigil.
Yes.
How many people of so many different ethnicities, races, and faiths were at that vigil? That's who the nation is. So why did we not hear Wadia's name? Why did we need to author a resolution, push for a congressional hearing, then really find it difficult to actually have the congressional hearing and name Wadia in the halls of Congress? Why? When the nation recognized that it was an American tragedy. And I'm assuming it would only be because it humanizes the population. And by the way, the advisors at one point, I told them, I said, I'm not Palestinian. And they were shocked. And they said, you're not? And I said, no, because I'm a human being. And I think that's what we have to drive in. We don't live in silos.
That is the bottom line, folks. At the end of the day, we are human beings first, and then we can put in any kind of nationalities on it. And that's what I want to leave you with the thought on this one. We're going to be taking a break shortly, and after we come back from the break, we'll be discussing more on what actually happened over there. And there's something happening tomorrow, and I don't want to focus on that, except that it's going to be the Martin Luther King Day holiday. So a happy Martin Luther King Day to everybody. And the rest of them can go pound sand for all I care, okay? We'll be right back after this break. Ken, are we going for the break now in about 30 seconds? And if you're listening to us on the radio, please stay tuned on WCPT 820 AM. If you're watching us on Facebook, we will be posting this video back on our website also. So go to tlsradio.com after this break is over, and you will be able to watch us tomorrow on our website. But meanwhile, while the break is going on, let us continue the conversation over here as to what else is going to be important for us as we go into this new administration, and what are we going to be looking for as far as, is there anything good going to be happening coming out of this administration? I'm pretty sure there's going to be some good coming out, okay? But if we are going to be looking at just the bad of it, I think that's going to reflect bad on us. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to find a balance, right?
Turn up the radio. There's some news that you should know.
Have no fear with regard to renewable energy. If you own property, either residential or commercial, in Northern Illinois, you most likely qualify for massive federal, state, and utility incentives. Grab a piece of paper and a pen and write down this number, 630-785-0031. You can have a no-cost, no-obligation conversation with a ComEd Greenlight expert that can help you figure out which incentives you qualify for. Again, call 630-785-0031 for a free, no-cost, no-obligation assessment. 630-785-0031.
Welcome back to the Lightning Strike with Mohammed Fahim.
Lightning strike.
Okay, welcome back to the Lightning Strike, and Ken is managing our connections with the studios today, and so if we go back and forth a little bit, bear with us. Okay, if you don't bear with us, it's your loss, not mine. Okay, that's the way that I've always conducted my life. And with me in the studios today, Ken DeLuke, John Arena, and Maria Muzaffar. And we are talking about what happened with the recent trip that Maria made to the White House, the kind of empathy that the president has shown. Maria, what specific actions did President Biden promise, if any, after the meeting with Wadi al-Fayoum's mother?
So, okay, let's go back to your first statement, because that is the critique.
Mm-hmm.
You said that President Biden showed such empathy for Wadia's death, and that should not be emphasized or publicized because of the impact on Gaza.
Yeah.
So we're not going to frame it that way, because this was an opportunity for both humans to connect, and they've lost children. So both of them had an empathetic moment. It's only known between each other. And I believe God created that moment for them, and they have a right to have that moment. As far as what promises were made, this was not a meeting to ask for political promises. It was much bigger than that.
Okay.
I don't want us to think this small. Mm-hmm. This window opened up to be able to address some of the largest themes that are coming down in our nation, to divide and deceive about people and our neighbors among us. And so we wanted to send a message that we are all connected through humanity. And what he recognized, obviously, that was the case. What we also wanted to share to the advisors, that was the case. And we had a whole strategy of press after it to share, because we wanted to reaffirm to the nation. I just want to make very clear that they didn't do any press. The White House did not do any press about this meeting.
Okay, yeah, because they didn't want to, I guess, right? They've got so many other things going on.
There may be many reasons why they didn't want to do it, but this is another a protection in our nation, the freedom of speech, to be able to tell our stories, right?
Speaking of press, I noticed you've gotten some local coverage. Where can somebody look at what you've done locally on the internet?
Well, I believe it's on the front page of Chicago Sun-Times this weekend. It's also in the Tribune. It's also on WBEZ, and it's also on CNN. And then we're going to continue. We're going to continue to tell the story, because the discussion is much larger than the presidency.
Right.
The discussion is about dehumanization and how, as a country,
that is the most important takeaway that I want people to take from this. This was an opportunity to again highlight the plight of the dehumanization that is happening all over the world, not just in Palestine, right?
And maybe there's an opportunity, since the ceasefire's happening, and on the way in I was listening to that there was another bombing because of this supposed delay between getting the 3 names of the Israeli hostages that were being released. So they used that as an opportunity to drop a few more bombs.
Yeah, I think they killed 24 more people.
Something in that range. Just real quick, but what they're saying is people are rushing into Rafah now to see if their homes are still there, but there's unexploded ordnance, there are bodies under the rubble. I think the dehumanization that is massive and 15 months long, hopefully this is part of what's going to be uncovered.
Yes.
How can this play into this narrative, and we keep the focus on the aftermath of the ceasefire, not that this is over and we're back to normal, because
speaking
it's
of
not
aftermath,
normal in
they have a huge problem right now with the relief efforts, in that they have numerous trucks full of supplies to help with that. But unfortunately, the way to get the supplies to the people, in many cases, the roads are not passable. There's a big problem there in just getting the stuff to the refugees, and now they're getting into a very cold situation in winter. People are worried about hypothermia. There's a lot of things that are really messed up that they have to address in a much more aggressive
and
way.
children have already frozen to death. They have starved to death. They have frozen to death. And I want to touch on something. In July, I took a trip to Bosnia. I took a trip and I visited the Genocide Museum there. Mm-hmm. And I sat there and I watched the videos, and I watched, obviously, there's a footage of Bill Clinton there. And there's actually a very compelling address, which I said to President Biden in person, that there's a compelling address. In 1995, he made an address on the Senate floor. And he said, genocide, genocide, genocide. That's what he said. He said, nobody wants to take a stance on what happens when you go against someone because of their ethnicity. I'm taking a side.
Yeah.
So I only say this because when I look at Bosnia and I look at why it happened and how it happened, it was actually the aftermath, the uncovering of the hidden graves and the secondary graves that people started recognizing this actually happened on our watch. So you're correct. I bring this to your point that the ceasefire is just the beginning of the story of what as a nation and as a world, we can actually learn about ourselves, because how did we let it get this far?
Yeah, that's the striking contrast we need.
One of the
people
things,
to think of a ceasefire as being, one, it's a 6-week, this phase, and then it's, a constant exchange of hostages on both sides, and then, so it's going to play out over a long period of time, but this uncovering is going to be like a really important reporting and understanding of what
and I also want to say this dispute about the word genocide also has to be opened up.
Yeah.
It has to be opened up. People have this opinion. People will say it's not a genocide. Let's break that echo chamber and let's talk about facts. Let's leave the definition of genocide aside. Let's just focus on facts. And let's talk about the graves that are hidden, the babies that are starved, and the babies that are freezing. Let's talk on that, because that brings it back to the human level. That takes it away from you're calling it this, I'm calling it this. We can agree that the crushing of babies is not something anybody wants to see or should allow. So let's start at the basic level, and that's what to counter dehumanization, you have to get back to the basics. And that actually embodies why the visit was so important.
And that is so true, folks. Here's the thing that we have to understand, that so far the political side has put in so many roadblocks into finding out what is happening. For example, Israel went ahead and kicked out most of the journalists from Al Jazeera, right? They're not supposed to, they cannot report from there. What are they trying to hide? So when you don't have independent journalists going in and actually reporting facts on the ground, then obviously there is something there that they don't want people to see. So how do you get around that bend with especially the new administration coming in over here? Because let's face it, it's not, Israel just didn't do it by themselves, okay? I'm definitely not going to accept that Israel just went and did some things. America was behind it, okay? The American hand was all over the place. We are the ones who supplied the bombs and the bullets and all the other things that are falling over there. Those things were not made in Israel, right? So obviously, if you follow the money,
well, yes,
this thing is not going to end with just the truce or the ceasefire.
Well, this goes to what's the responsibility of the manufacturer of the weapon, and what's the responsibility of the person who's pulling the trigger on the weapon.
Right.
And that's
I'm going to go beyond just the manufacturer. I'm going to go to our policymakers. Who are the ones who are actually making these things happen? This is something that I was discussing with our local mayor also. And we were talking about, is the truce going to hold? I have a strong feeling the truce is not going to hold. Okay, because if you don't burn a bullet, you're not going to be able to buy another bullet. And somebody's not going to be able to make that bullet or the bomb, right? So if you follow the money, I have very strong reservations that this thing is going to hold. I hope it does, for all our sakes. But looking at the situation, folks, every few days, someone else comes in and says, okay, someone bombed me. I mean, there is things happening that we don't know that are happening.
Well, let's break the echo chamber a little bit on what you just said. You just said Israel is not allowing journalists there. They're definitely hiding something. Now, we have to be very cognizant of how this is compelling to people that will disagree with you. People who will disagree with you will say, the journalists that we let in will slant this and exploit this, and it's going to result in anti-Semitic narratives, okay? So we need to understand what the other side is saying, so to speak, because and that's why it's so important to break the echo chamber, and let's just talk about facts.
Okay.
Let's talk about how many lives have been lost. Let's talk about humanitarian aid. Let's talk about access to humanitarian aid. Let's talk about violation of international law. And let's also not talk about one nation. So I'm not, like you said, I'm not interested in talking about Israel's roles. Israel's is continuing what it's doing, and it's defending itself and its narrative. I'm interested in, as a nation, what we are doing in that whole display, which is what you're addressing. But our responsibility is, like you said, to speak to our policymakers and say, are you consistently saying that we are putting our stamp, our national American integrity and character in line with dehumanizing policies that's crushing children? That's as simple as it is. We don't have to make it more complicated.
Right, especially when we as a nation have come up on the basis of that we are all about humans and human rights all over the world. Okay, we go and criticize human rights in other countries, for example, China and Saudi Arabia. We constantly say, oh, they don't have human rights. Well, if we as the beacon of hope for humanity in the world don't hold up our end of the bargain when it comes to certain countries.
Yeah, but I guess the only thing I'll challenge on that is that we live in a weaponized global society. So we have been supplying weapons to all parts of the globe forever, and that's not going to change. So the question is, how do you have the nuanced conversation if it's, well, we have blood on our hands because we sold jets to them 10 years ago. We don't know how they're going to be used. There is a moral decision to be made about releasing those weapons into the world that we have to have a discussion about.
That's exactly the problem.
Yeah.
We first of all, let's define we. As a nation, I think if you polled everybody and you asked them all these questions, we would come on the right side of the equation. The problem is when you get authoritarians like Netanyahu, who's desperate to stay in power, so he has this continuing war going on, so he can't be challenged. When you have people like our newly elected president coming in and doing all the things that he does, we doesn't count. The only way to get around that is to get people motivated to express their power by going and voting and getting people in there that will represent their interests.
But I think there's something that starts before that, and it's one: are we making? What's the education that's coming in deciding that vote?
Absolutely.
Because how Fox News is going to report as they start uncovering tunnels, it's going to be about the tunnels.
Yeah.
Versus the children starving to death and freezing to death because there's no roads to get food to them. What are the media? This gets back to the fundamental responsibility.
They have to have a counter narrative. CNN has to get out there and do that type of stuff or whatever.
But we have to. I mean, to the motivation of the killer of Wadid is he was given a drug. He was given it for 2 weeks straight in high doses, and it motivated him to do something unreasonable by anybody's definition. This is our problem right now. We have this drug. You can turn on CNN or Fox News or CNN and you can hear a completely different narrative of the world, of the same video describing a situation we can see, and the narrative is completely different, and it is at the most extreme.
Well,
that is our biggest challenge.
I agree, and I will say this because I am an optimist. And I want to create and see the world we want to do. I think we all want to do that. I don't underestimate the American mind watching media if we speak in nuances. That's what we haven't done. All of media is sound bites, right?
Yes.
So we have to open up. Look at social media. Everything is 30 seconds. No one's going to watch beyond 30 seconds. Well, you can't really dig deep. So you're teaching a whole generation to just listen to sound bites. But if we open up discussion in nuances, then we can make smart decisions. And I will say that it's not about who is in office. Like I was saying, the visit was not about President Biden. It's not about the elected officials only. It's about what we're putting in place to inspire a new way of being. And we have to create that outside of what we see that is available now. So no elected official is going to save the country and say, but we could. We could literally change the paths of how we relate to one another, how we address policy, what we write. Something that we were discussing yesterday at a civics engagement workshop is how legislation is written. We talk about that all the time. People don't know that you can create and write what you want to see. When we're speaking about how stories are told. It's all about creating what we want to see in the future. So I think we have to empower ourselves, but I don't say empower, remind ourselves of the power we have.
Yeah.
You know?
I just, a news item just came across just now. Trump has just said he's going to, by executive order, delay TikTok's,
we know
demise.
that.
Yeah, I mean, he just made that announcement
He's
just
gonna
now.
win.
So that's
So
going to
how
happen Monday.
how do you feel about that?
I feel, well, the problem, like you said, the youth, the people coming up, they listen to the world in sound bites, and I have no problem with TikTok going away for a while, because that'll force them to get news from other sources, which maybe will open their eyes a little bit.
So let me break the echo chamber for you.
Okay.
I have a huge problem with TikTok and social media and what it does to children. 100%. I've discussed this before. Digital dopamine addiction. So as a mental health issue, absolutely. I was in discussion with a few people about this yesterday, and they fired back. They said, "Are you kidding me? TikTok is the only social media platform not controlled by the contemporary media narratives right now that exist." And so, TikTok is where a lot of video is coming out of Gaza, right? Mm-hmm. So see how that changes. Yeah. People are like, no, TikTok is the only way we could get our videos in. This is the only way we humanize what was happening in Gaza because people couldn't see it. Yeah. So
but they manufacture, and I think this goes to I'm not as optimistic as you about the American mind right now, but hopefully that'll change because of pendulum swings. And
yes.
Unfortunately, it has to swing further and further now in order for change to come, in my opinion. But both my son and another young person that I had engaged with during this week talked about Red Note. Mm-hmm. So that is truly, its terms and conditions are written in Mandarin. Right. It is truly a product of the Communist Chinese Party. Mm-hmm. The narrative about TikTok is because it's so influential and because it was not controlled in its messaging and couldn't be controlled is the reason why. There is no direct link. The CEO is from Singapore, which is not of China. And he testified in front of the Senate to that fact over and over again, being questioned, have you ever been a member? No, I'm not. He's here. He's an American wife. I mean, it's... There's a narrative created about this particular medium for a particular reason, and that's why it's banned. It's not banned because it's of the Chinese Party. Yet there is a true social media that people are now moving to that is of the Chinese Communist Party. Mm-hmm. That's not being banned. There's no consideration for that. Maybe not yet, but here we go.
What do you think of the thing that, TikTok has 147 million followers, and obviously it is generating some good revenue, okay? I was watching something the other day which said that maybe Elon Musk was planning on buying TikTok, or Trump wants... The oligarchs are coming into power, okay? The next administration is going to be about the billionaires trying to become trillionaires, okay? That's what it's going to be happening. So anything that is generating revenue from somewhere, they're going to come up with some kind of excuse to ban it, slash it, burn it, or maybe get a portion of it,
or buy it and then shift the narrative, like Twitter,
they did with
to
Twitter.
now being a white supremacist hellhole.
Yeah.
So they, of course, they were hoping some American was going to buy it, and I'm sure it was an American media company that tends to lean right is who they were hoping was going to pick it up. And that may be what happens.
That
with
may be
Elon
what
Musk.
is happening because for
But
Trump
that's
to
the
come
strategy, and until we realize that's the manipulation that's happening, as opposed to it's where information is not being directly manipulated that they don't want to continue.
Well, can you imagine if somebody's sitting in a beautiful hotel in a beautiful office in Doha and says, you know what? I'm going to buy TikTok. Completely possible. These curveballs happen.
Well, that's what
somebody in
happened with Al
Doha,
Jazeera,
somebody in UAE, and says, I'm taking it. What's going to happen then? You know,
but I guess the law, the ban says that it has to be an American-owned company. So is that will that
here's the
get
thing.
around the ban?
Here's the thing. Most of the American companies,
Maybe Warren Buffett will step to the plate.
Oh, Warren Buffett is not a fool. He's not.
George Soros has a few dollars. Let's get him. I don't think they'll like
we
that.
got about 7-8 minutes to finish off this last show of the Biden administration and some things that I wanted to focus on. Is there anything good that can be said about Biden and his legacy in the next few minutes? is there something that we can leave our listeners with on a positive note, that not all was bad. What happened, of course, horrible things happened.
Oh, are you kidding? He's got an unbelievable record.
Yeah,
the IRA Act was phenomenal, okay? Putting all that extra
Inflation
money...
Reduction Act.
The Inflation Reduction Act. So he's got tons of money into the environment that's already been allocated. It'll be really hard for Trump to overturn that stuff.
The infrastructure...
Yeah, the infrastructure bill.
Act.
You've taken unemployment from the highest level it's ever been to the lowest level it's ever been. You've taken the Dow. The economy has gone through the roof. In just about every metric that you can measure, his administration has been a phenomenal godsend. And I think we're going to see some very, very serious buyer's remorse in the next few months when they figured out that dog caught the bumper and now they're in a whole hell of a trouble right now.
We hope. I mean, yeah, there's. I think this is the challenge with, just like Carter. He came out of office in almost a very similar time, right, with Middle East troubles, with a manipulation of maybe some of those troubles by the incoming administration, and a drumbeat of the economy being one thing versus another. Now, I don't think the economy situation in 1979 versus now, it's different pressures. But, we see the price of eggs has now jumped, right? And Trump has just literally said, well, it's kind of hard to manage that stuff because he doesn't have a billion chickens sitting around somewhere where he can start providing eggs. It's a supply and demand problem because of the bird flu. So we've been promised something. The American people took that to heart, and now we'll see what actually they do. And I think that's where it may be a little bit of, well, maybe things weren't so bad back then. Way back in 2024
that's what
versus
Ken was
what we can
saying
see
about
going
buyer's
forward.
remorse of getting Trump in, because this guy has really promised that on day one he's going to be a dictator.
Well, can I go back because we haven't
Please go
finished the conversation about was there anything good about Biden's administration?
Yeah,
I want to say something to that. So Biden's administration was the most diverse. He appointed many women and people from different ethnicities and backgrounds and communities. That is 100% true. He went to bat for individuals who were wanting to get confirmed in top positions that were facing, discrimination during their confirmation hearings. Lena Khan is an amazing example. Brilliant mind. Dilawar Suri, brilliant mind. So he did appoint wonderful people. This is, in my mind, what had happened, though. They were all, and I've heard from people inside the DOJ and White House counsel that everything was going in a great direction until October 7th. October 7th happened, and then things changed. The press releases were controlled. The agendas were controlled. The priorities were controlled. And people's hands were tied in many different places, and people buckled under a certain narrative. So I think we need to see where it began as an example of what is possible, and then where it fell. And I think where it fell is that our Constitution and our recognition of commitment to humanity has to go all the way to the finish line. There's not a select definition of humans and hate crimes and hierarchies of communities. We're all equal. And I think that's where it fell.
So at the end of the day, folks, we need to go back to our Constitution and the constitutional rights and responsibilities that are granted to us, not just as the elected officials, but as citizens also. And we have to learn what is happening out there and how can we hold our elected representatives accountable. That's something that I've been preaching about for the last year and a half that we have got this show going on now, is get up, take notice, don't stand on the sidelines and criticize. Get involved, especially at the local level. Municipal elections are coming up. I really, really want to leave people with this one thing today, that municipal elections are very important, much more important than, in some cases, John, than the national elections. Because this is where policy starts at the grassroots. Right?
Yeah, I mean, just to give an example, the park that you're having named after Wadea, there could be somebody running that says we don't want that type of symbolism. It just shows you at the local level it can really affect your relationship with your neighbors and what their sentiments are based on how people impact you on a very micro level.
And let me just show this in there. On the state level, for your state reps and your state senators, that's really important because that's where districting comes into play. And when you gerrymander a district, you could have more than a majority of somebody who has their head together, and you have just a few people who don't that are controlling the narrative and the politics of it.
Yeah, I mean the Republicans. That's what was their strategy to come in to low, to these lower level seats, and then start ceding that ground and finding those irritation points.
That is where it's so important, folks, for us to get involved at the local level. We are about to finish off our 1 hour today on our last show of the Biden administration. Coming in next week, we will be talking about what happened during the week. It's going to be there's going to be a flurry of executive orders coming in at afternoon on Monday, that is tomorrow. Tuesday is going to be things.
Day one's going to be busy
in Chicago, and we want you all to keep the faith and stay warm. And we'll be back with you next week on the Lightning Strike. Do tune in to us on WCPT 820 AM. Go to our website, which is tlsradio.com or tlschicago.com, and follow us on the internet also. We'll be seeing you all next week. Thank you so much for listening in.
The preceding program, The Lightning Strike, was sponsored by Mohammed Fahim, and to the extent applicable, their guests. The views and opinions expressed therein do not necessarily reflect those of Heartland Signal, LLC, or its management.